Hey guys, so this is our first video over plants, okay, and it's going to be the introduction of plants and a little bit about the evolution of plants. We'll make a cladogram to show how these plants actually evolved from algae to what we know today as flowering plants, or as we discussed in class, angiosperms, okay? So the first thing we need to talk about plants is that they are the most dominant group of organisms on land. Okay, they're everywhere. They range from very tiny plants to huge plants, very tall plants. Okay, so that's 2 millimeters to about 100 meters tall. 100 meters is about the length of a football field. So you can see some of those trees, like the ones here in the picture. Okay, they're really tall. Okay, so they have a big range on when it comes to size. Okay. All plants are photosynthetic. Some of them are carnivorous, some of them are parasitic, but they still photosynthesize. Yes, they get food by, like the Venus flytrap that you see here in the picture, this one right here, right? They get nutrients from animals, but their main source of energy is through photosynthesis. Okay, so they do go through photosynthesis, even though they are carnivorous. So that's just a little bit about plants. Now, plants evolve from what we know as algae or protists, the unicellular, meaning they only had one cell. So I'm sure when you've been to, maybe you've seen a pond or a puddle, something that's been there for a while, and you've seen algae on it, right? That's protist, and it's unicellular. It's one cell, right? But something happened here. Okay, several steps happen in order for plants to evolve to what we know today. Big trees and big trees or flowering plants or whatever plant we're looking at today. Okay. Now, one of those things is that these organisms became multicellular, and that allowed these plants or these organisms to actually adapt better to their environment, right? And one of the reasons is because the more cells there are, the more chances there is for some of those cells to actually mutate or have a mutation that allows the organism to survive better in the environment that it's at. So again, being multicellular allowed these plants that were evolving from protists or algae to become better adapted for their environment, survive and reproduce more. Okay, so in class we went through a lab and we actually made slides from our own cells. Okay, and we looked at them under the microscope, and they looked something like this ones, right? And I asked you guys to label the cells. Okay, and if you weren't here for that lab, make sure you understand what we're looking at in this picture. So this right here, okay, the outer line here, that represents the cell membrane of a cell. Okay, this dark area here, that's your nucleus, just like it's labeled. Okay, and everything in between the cell membrane and the nucleus is called the cytoplasm. Okay, so make sure you can see this cells and identify what we're looking at. This is another one, is still stained with blue. Okay, this one is stained with methyl red, but it's the same thing. Okay, so we have the outer part of it, that's your cell membrane, that's your nucleus, and everything in between those two, that's the cytoplasm. Okay, so make sure you're able to look at a cell like this and identify it as an animal cell, and those three parts, the cell membrane, the nucleus, and the cytoplasm. We looked at some plant cells, and as you can see here, they're also labeled. So we can see that this area right here, the surrounding area here, okay, this dark area, that's our cell wall. Remember, the cell wall is made out of glucose. This clear circular structure is the nucleus, and then all these little green circles here are the chloroplasts. Remember that chloroplasts are responsible for photosynthesis in plants, okay? And that's how they make their glucose. So again, we made some cells and we looked at them under the microscope. Make sure you look at this. You can pause the video and look at the cells, but make sure you can identify those parts, okay? And then in class we also compare plants and animals, and I know some of you guys can probably do this without even watching this video, but we're gonna go through the characteristics that I have here just as a review. So plants, we know they have a cell wall and is made out of glucose. Okay, they also have chloroplast that's responsible for photosynthesis. That's the organelle that produces all the glucose that the plants need. The cell wall is made out of cellulose. I think I said glucose. Okay, but they also have a large central vacuole where they store water and a lot of the nutrients that the plant needs. Okay, they are autotrophic, meaning they make their own food, and they do that through photosynthesis. Okay, animals are motile, meaning they can move from place to place. They have cilia that allows them to attach to different things and move in their environment. Flagella, like the sperm cell, right, that allows them to move through their environment. We are heterotrophic, or animals are heterotrophic, meaning they have to eat other animals or other organisms in order to get energy. They don't make their own food. The cells, they both have a nucleus, so they're eukaryotic. Okay, they have membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria, chloroplast, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes. Okay, they have DNA. They also have ribosomes, which are not organelles. They're structures in the cell. Ribosomes make proteins. They synthesize proteins. And DNA, we know that it's a double helix. Okay. They also have cytoplasm, which is what keeps all the organelles in place, and that's the space between the nucleus and the cell membrane. Okay. You should have this picture in your notebook and just use it to go over it and just kind of identify the parts. Make sure that you can differentiate between the plant cell and the animal cell. Okay, this one is the HIV virus. This one is the bacteriophage, which is a virus that only affects bacteria. Okay, and we know that the glycoproteins here in the HIV virus are not like cilia. They're not used for movement. Those glycoproteins are actually used for attachment to the helper T cells, which is what the HIV virus attacks. Okay, all right. Now, when we talk about plant evolution and how it actually evolved, how they evolved from algae to what the plants we know today, this is the first plants that actually evolved, non-vascular plants. These are plants that have no vascular tissue. Okay, so the vascular tissue is like your veins, arteries, and capillaries in your body. Okay, vascular tissue in plants is responsible for moving water and nutrients anywhere the plant needs it. Okay, but these plants didn't have that, so they had to live very close to the water. They had no roots, stems, or leaves, and some examples of that are mosses and liverworts. And you can see the examples there. Again, this plants had to be very close to the water because they didn't have no way of absorbing some of the water that they needed if they were away from a water source. After that, seedless vascular plants evolves, and these are plants that developed vascular tissue so they could live farther from the water. They had roots, stems, and leaves. Okay, examples are ferns and horsetails. They didn't produce any leaves, any seeds, but they had vascular tissue, so they could live, or they could adapt to environments away from the water. The next plants, or the next evolutionary step that happened was plants evolving into what we know as gymnosperms. These are plants that have seeds, but these seeds are naked. They don't have nothing surrounding the seed. Okay, like an apple, if you take a bite of an apple, you see that in the center or in the core there are seeds. That's because the seeds are protected by that fruit. Okay, well, these types of plants don't have any protection. They're just, and that's why they call them naked seeds. These are the most successful groups of plants in the planet. Okay, they required the wind to pollinate or reproduce. Okay, because they'll just drop their seeds and hopefully the wind takes them where they need to be. Some examples of that are conifers and cicadas. Okay, and then the plants and trees that we know today are angiosperms. Anytime you get flowers or you have a tree that produces tree, that's an angiosperm. Okay, those are flowering plants. They produce seeds that are enclosed by fruit. So when you're eating an apple or any type of fruit, you're actually eating part of the protection of the seeds. Okay, and he's actually the ovary. Sorry about that. He's actually the ovary of the plant. You're eating the ovary of the plant. The ovules turn into the seeds. The ovary turns into the fruit. Okay, and these are plants that actually produce flowers and require pollinators like bees to reproduce. Okay, now we're going to make a cladogram in order to show the evolutionary steps that plants have taken. So let me pull this up, and you should have this in your notebook, but if you don't, make sure you put it in your notebook. Okay, so the first thing that happened, give me 1 second. So the first thing that we need to look at is to find the organism that has all zeros across the characteristics. Okay, so algae we see that has all zeros. Remember that zeros represent or tell us that that organism has no characteristics. And the first one we're going to have, or the first one we're going to put in our cladogram, it's algae, because he has no characteristics. It doesn't produce flowers. He's not multicellular. He has no seeds, or it doesn't have vascular tissue. So we put algae there. Then we're going to add a characteristic, and the only characteristic, or the next organism that has at least one characteristic, are non-vascular plants, and that characteristic is multicellular. So they are multicellular, so that's what we're going to put. So algae, after multicellular organisms evolve, then we had non-vascular plants, then vascular tissue showed up, and that would be our gymnosperms. And if you look at your chart, you can see that gymnosperms actually have our gymnosperms do have vascular tissue, but we need to put something else. This is not gymnosperms. This is actually seedless vascular plants. So we can add that, seedless vascular plants. Okay. And then we add the other characteristics, and the other characteristics would be seeds. And then this is where we would put our gymnosperms. Okay. Gymnosperms do have seeds. And then the last characteristic that developed was flowers, and that is what characterizes angiosperms. Okay. Angiosperms. There you go. So that's your cladogram. That's the evolution of plants, from algae all the way to angiosperms. Make sure you get this in your notebook so that you can look at it for review and be able to know the evolution of plants. After this, we did our adaptation of plants worksheet. You should have it, and if you don't, I'll make a video going over it. But make sure you go over your adaptations of plants so you know how plants actually adapted to different environments.